Whether you've experienced trauma or not, you've had a lot of moments in your life where you felt strong emotions, and those strong emotions leave an imprint in the subconscious of your mind. Living with stress, living with tension, ultimately it's just gonna make you sick.
How do you think our culture sets us up, positively or negatively, to have meaningful romantic relationships?
Wow, I've never gotten that question before. It's literally like a war against ignorance. And like
Whoa.
ignorance is constantly trying to accumulate itself, and this feeling comes up and it's supposed to protect me and defend me. But really, like, is anger always gonna be the productive solution? Or is fear gonna be the productive solution? Or do you just need to pause and slow down so that you can allow the intentional you to move forward? I didn't wanna die. I was like, this is not the time for me.
Casual magic is about how we find beauty in the mundane every day. We all look forward to the 1% of days in our lives that are extraordinary, like the wedding, the birthday, the job promotion. But 99% of our days, of our lives, are just ordinary. And wouldn't it be sad if we only allowed ourselves to find joy 1% of the time? Hi everyone, welcome to Finding Your Casual Magic. My name is Jade, and I've got a very special guest for you today. Today we are talking relationships, healing, and how to love better. From spotting red flags and green flags to finding a deeper understanding during everyday conflicts, the secret to any good relationship actually starts with yourself. Are you expecting your relationships to feel easy? And when challenge arises, you feel tempted to run? Do you often find yourself blaming your partner for not being better? Do you wonder often if your partner is the right person for you? There is a completely free, life-changing tool that you could adopt every day that would positively transform your relationships. And the magic of your own self-awareness is the key to accessing it. Today's guest is a relationship guru, writer, and avid meditator with over 15,000 hours of experience in meditation. Under the pen name Yung Pueblo, Diego has published multiple New York Times bestsellers, sharing his profound insights about life, meaning, and self-connection in books like Clarity and Connection, and his upcoming book focused on creating the relationships we crave, called How to Love Better. I have had the absolute privilege of reading How to Love Better in advance of its release, and guys, I can't express how good it is. I found myself screenshotting page after page because the way that he was able to articulate such elusive concepts into such succinct words was genuinely a gift to read. And I found myself reading passages that I was like, gosh, this relates so much to what my mum is going through. It relates to something that my friend is going through. I just wanted to circulate his wisdom. And so it is genuinely such a joy to have him on today. And I really believe that if you listen to this entire episode, something within you and your relationships will shift, because that is the nature of his work. So without further ado, hi Diego.
Hey Jade, thank you so much for having me on.
Of course. How are you feeling today?
I'm feeling quite good. Very happy to be here.
Amazing. Welcome to London.
Yeah.
So we have a tradition at the start of every episode where I love to invite my guest and everyone listening to meditate with me.
Sure.
And to take a moment to just ground for about 60 to 90 seconds. And if anyone listening has never meditated before, I promise it's not scary. You don't need to have a life epiphany in the next 60 seconds. We're literally just going to spend a few moments breathing, and I'd love you to take a moment to just go inward.
Sure.
Take a second to notice where you are in space. Are you in a room? If so, how big is the room? Are you outside? What can you see? And if you feel comfortable to do so, gently close your eyes. Start to become aware of your breathing. Notice where you feel the breath in your body. Maybe noticing the rise of your chest and belly at the inhale and fall on the exhale. Imagine yourself rooting down into the ground, feeling grounded and aware. And maybe notice if you're carrying tension anywhere in your body. If you can, try to allow that tension to release at the exhale. We're going to do a final 4, 6, 8 breath, where you'll take a deep inhale for 4, hold it for 6, and then exhale for 8. So when you're ready, deep inhale for 1, 2, 3, 4, and hold at the top for 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and big exhale for 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And when you're ready, you can gently open your eyes. Welcome to the episode. Hi, Diego. How did that feel for you?
Yeah, I was just observing my sensations and they're still changing. It felt good.
Amazing. I can imagine that was not a daunting ask for you to have to do just 60 seconds.
No, it was good. It's always nice to tap into what's true.
It is a joy to have you here today, and I would love to just start by asking if you could tell us more about your story, who you are,
sure.
what has shaped you, and what has brought you into doing the work that you're doing today.
My story starts in Ecuador, where I was born, a little country in South America. When I was about 4 years old, my mom and dad realized that we needed to move for just literally a chance at a better life. When we picked up and left, it was 1992. My brother was 9 years old and I was 4. And we moved to Boston in the United States. Immediately, we were stuck in a very classic American poverty trap. My mom, she worked cleaning houses, and my dad worked at a supermarket. So in terms of like upward mobility, there was very little chance for us. And we lived like that for about 15 years, basically until my brother and I started getting older. It was a struggle. It was a constant struggle where, my mom and dad were trying to figure out how to pay the rent, trying to figure out how to put food in the fridge. And it was like a non-ending battle. And sometimes it would feel like we were existing in a submarine that was too deep underwater. And it's like you can feel like the pressure of the water pushing into the home. Unknowingly, that just like imprinted so deeply in my mind, where I thought it was normal, but also I was like constantly living with anxiety, constantly living with that stress and fear of like, feeling my parents' fear of how are we going to pay the rent and hearing their conversations and whatnot. When I got older, I didn't realize how I had no way to process that. And when I got to university, that's when I started picking up all these really bad habits where I was partying a ton, using a lot of drugs and alcohol, and just doing that to sort of basically run away from my emotions that I didn't want to embrace. That led to like a stunning rock bottom moment where I just like almost lost my life because I pushed my body to the edge, took way too many drugs one night. And when I was on the floor, literally like, feeling like my heart was going to explode, I realized that the problem was that I had just been lying to myself. Like I was not telling myself the truth that something was wrong.
Damn.
Yeah.
And how did that rock bottom become a turning point for your healing journey?
It was interesting because I hadn't really deeply thought about my parents in a while because I was like so in the mix of like one party after another and just like chasing this high. And when I hit that rock bottom moment, I kept seeing, I was like, I feel like my life is leaving my body, but I kept thinking about the risk and the chance and the opportunity my parents gave me and how I was wasting that. I didn't want to die. I was like, this is not the time for me. These realizations came really quickly. And it was like, okay, you've been telling yourself lies. So now start telling yourself the truth. And that's really what started it all. Like I took the hard drugs, I threw them away. And then I just started doing really simple things, like literally going on long walks, trying to like eat salads and eat more nutritious food.
Wow.
Like having these moments where I would challenge myself, like if anxiety would arise, and this is like before meditating, when anxiety would arise, instead of rolling up another joint, just feel it, just sit there and feel it. Because I knew I was like, I'm running away from it. So let me do the opposite. Let me just challenge myself to feel that discomfort. I would sit there 5, 10, 15 minutes and I'm like feeling it, literally sitting on my bed. And I'm like, okay, this sucks, but I'm okay. It's not as bad as I thought.
But that's so impressive that you were able to do that without any external tool or practice or perhaps someone supporting you through that.
Yeah.
To be able to just decide one day, I'm not going to do this anymore, and to embrace those feelings. Like, was there anything supporting you, or was it kind of just that intrinsic
Honestly,
motivation?
this was the summer of 2011. So it's very like pre-wellness, pre-Instagram.
Yeah.
Like it wasn't like you can just go on social media and like, find tips and tricks and all that stuff. It more so felt like it wasn't rocket science, because to me it was like, okay, these are the things that I was doing before. Let me do the opposite.
Yeah.
I was living a very like unhealthy life, like mentally and physically. So I'm like, okay, instead of being sedentary, let me walk, let me like sign up to a gym, instead of just like eating greasy foods all the time, like let me eat some greens, like, and instead of running away from my emotions by constantly smoking weed and drinking, let me just feel them and see what happens.
And I think a lot of people will come to this episode and see a title about healing ourselves and think, but I'm not broken. Why do I need to heal?
Yeah.
And I would love to hear more about, in that moment, did you recognize that you needed to do that healing? And was that something that you felt almost defensive about? Like, oh, I need to change, or were you quite embracing of it?
It was funny because this is also a era where like I don't even think I was thinking in the terms of healing.
Yes.
Like it wasn't even like that word was a thing. Like that word didn't really become a part of my life until like 2013. Like you can think about it as healing or growth. To me, it's like they're both the development of new habits that help you live a better life. For example, I had this like dramatic rock bottom moment. You don't need to have that to realize that like,
Hopefully not.
oh, I can develop like more patience. I can develop more compassion. I can, keep expanding my emotional skill set. Whether you've experienced trauma or not, you've had a lot of moments in your life where you felt strong emotions, and those strong emotions leave an imprint in the subconscious of your mind. That imprint in the subconscious of your mind creates a layer of perception where you're like literally interacting with the present through the lens of the past. And that happens to all of us.
Can you explain that even more? So I'd really love for everyone listening to understand this link between our past experiences and how they start to manifest in the behaviors that we have today, and then how that shows up in our relationships.
Totally. So when you have those sort of like strong reaction moments, it just builds up in the mind as conditioning. And that conditioning will create almost a filter in your perception where you're constantly taking the present in and seeing in what ways is that similar to the past. And you're like, oh, this reminds me of this. And when this happens, I have this feeling. And this feeling comes up and it's supposed to protect me and defend me. But really, like, is anger always going to be the productive solution? Or is like fear going to be the productive solution? Or do you just need to pause and slow down so that you can allow the intentional you to move forward? And this is something that I try to write about at times where we think that our first reaction is the real you. No, that is just your past. That impulsivity is literally your past trying to take over your present. So you have to be really careful with that.
Interesting. So sometimes our gut reaction, our intuition is actually just a learned pattern rather than something productive.
I would say there's even a subtlety there where your intuition is actually not as dramatic. It's like a little quieter and calmer as opposed to a reaction where reactions like roar into the forefront and they just jump out. And sometimes we think that those like big movements are us, but really they're not. There's just the past. And like to me, intuition feels much more like this like calm wave that just like keeps pulsating in a particular direction until you listen to it. And usually it's scary. It's scary in some degree because it's like pushing you outside of your comfort zone.
Could you perhaps give an example of a situation where someone might have experienced something in their past and we can see how that now shows up today in their behaviors or in their relationships?
When I look at how my past sort of conditioned my mind, I think I ended up, because my parents were so busy and they were like trying to literally keep the house afloat, I ended up spending a lot of time alone. It forced me to develop this like hard layer that I needed in the past. But then as I started getting older, that hard layer became like a block for my connections, so whether it's like friendships or whether it was like, when I met my wife, it was like I had to get through these layers of like feeling like I can figure it out alone, as opposed to just like being like, oh, I need help, or help me think about this thing.
I would actually love to read a passage from your book that I think relates to this. You convey things so beautifully in words in your book.
That's so kind of you. Thank you.
In your book, you say that the deep truth is that most human beings do not arrive into a relationship unscathed from the ups and downs of life.
Yeah.
From childhood to adulthood, life leaves its mark on your mind many times over, and these marks morph into patterns that are often coping mechanisms or defensive tactics you picked up while you were in survival mode. The hurt you have accumulated ultimately shapes the way that you perceive reality, and can even form walls that have to be broken down so that you can fully love yourself and others. To be able to love your partner well, a deep reckoning needs to happen, where you realize that how you love and heal yourself has a direct connection to how you show up in your relationship.
The word that stands out there is hurt. I think a lot of people find the word trauma as too heavy to describe them, where some people have definitely experienced a lot of trauma, others not so much. But everyone has experienced hurt, like hurt to some degree, where like there was a moment where you just did not get what you wanted, or someone said something to you that felt painful, and that pain leaves a little mark. And over time, those moments keep adding up and they affect us. And that's the reality of life. Like, even if you've been on your healing journey for 10, 15 years and you've been growing, developing all these skills, that doesn't mean life is going to be like perfectly smooth. It's going to continue having its ups and downs.
100%. So in that way, do you believe that everyone has trauma? Maybe not capital T trauma, but like little t trauma?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I would say like everyone has some degree of hurt or old pain or something about the past that they're attached to that they keep dragging into the present over and over again.
One of the main methods that you've discussed in your journey to being able to understand your relationship to your past hurts and how they show up in your relationships is meditation.
Yeah, for sure.
I would love to hear more about how you found meditation, how you got into that, and how that provided a turning point for self-awareness for you.
It all starts with my buddy Sam. He's one of my best friends. And
shout out Sam.
Yeah, Sam. He's amazing. He's like affected my life so positively. He was traveling through India, and he like somehow learned about Vipassana when he was out there, and he ended up signing up to a 10-day course. And Sam is also someone who like I used to be crazy with. Like I used to like really, we used to party so hard together. And like he goes to this meditation course and then writes to me and a few other friends about love, compassion, and goodwill, and how important these things are, and how, you know, like how transformative of an experience he had. And I was like, when I got the email, I was dumbfounded. I was like, what? Like,
is this the
is
Sam
this
I know?
real? Like, is this, I was like, is he for real or is he kidding? Like, he sent a few more emails and we were like talking about it. And I was just so honestly impressed. I was like impressed. And this was also, I'm getting this email 6 months after I hit my rock bottom moment. So the summer of 2011. So I'm hearing about his experience and I'm like, okay, I don't get it. I don't even know if I believe it. I gotta go. Like, I gotta go try this. I went the summer of 2012. I did my first course in Washington State, which is like the West Coast of the United States. It was terribly difficult. It was like, it was just so hard. Especially at that time, like I just had such big things that would come up with like anxiety, with tension, with fear. And it was so challenging that I spent a lot of that first course just thinking about how I was going to escape.
Wow. And can you explain more to everyone who's maybe not familiar with Vipassana?
Sure.
What is the 10-day course? What does that look
So
like?
you're like, we're talking these like silent 10-day courses that, and it's a teaching that originates from the Buddha. You're going away to basically clean out the mind. It's been, you know, so many years of developing all its conditioning, and then they give you a practice that helps just clean out this conditioning so that it's easier for you to make better decisions. And you're essentially going there to cultivate these three qualities: the quality of awareness, the quality of non-reaction, and the quality of compassion. Everybody has those qualities, but are they strong? Have you really cultivated them in your life? The meditation itself is quite simple. You're just observing reality as it is, but it's very hard to do when the mind wants to just jump around.
And what does the day-to-day routine of it look like?
You're going there and you have the opportunity to meditate about 11 hours a day. You're waking up really early in the morning at 4:15, 4:30, and you meditate all the way until 9 p.m. And you do have breaks in the middle, and you know, you're not just like sitting down endlessly. You know, like I've seen other techniques also help people amazingly in their lives.
Yes.
And I've also seen therapy help people like transform their lives, and psychiatry, like so many things. So I'm one to always support people and like find something that meets you where you're at. And if it feels good to you and it's giving you results, keep doing that.
I was going to ask, do you think everyone should do Vipassana?
I think you should do it if it piques your interest. And you like, once you read about it, you feel like you have the capacity for it. It's for a lot of people, but it's not for everyone.
I did my first Vipassana 10-day retreat last year, and I was introduced to it by some of my best friends at university from Vietnam, because it's very common in Vietnam.
Yeah.
One of my best friends did it in first year of uni during summer. She went and did it, and I remember thinking, that's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, 10 days in total silence.
Oh, we forgot to mention
hours.
no phone.
No
people
phone,
can't call you.
No journaling,
Yeah.
no reading, like virtually no stimulation and no contact to the outside world and everyone you know. And you literally are just sitting with your thoughts, and also no exercise, no strenuous exercise, which I think can shock some people too, who are big, gym goers.
Yeah,
the thought
yeah,
that you can only
yeah.
walk for the 10 days or so is a big endeavor. But I remember when she first introduced me to it, as you say, it piqued my interest.
Yeah.
And then when I left university, I experienced quite a big burnout from the intense workload. And I went to quite a unique university where I traveled to 6 countries across the degree with the same cohort of 160 people. And so it was a constant process of uprooting my life and creating home and then leaving that home again. And so I had a lot going on in my head. And for me, Vipassana was the place where I sat with all the experiences that I'd had in those 4 years. And it really met me at a time where I needed it. Since that day, meditation is one of the most essential habits in my life.
That's so cool, because I did mine like, pretty soon after uni as well. And it was like, just, I don't know how you felt, but like after I did my first one, I was like, damn, I learned more in 10 days than in like 4 years of college.
I think in terms of self-awareness, understanding of life, understanding of what makes you human, and relating to others' humanity. I actually came out of it and thought, I wish that this was an exam in schools. I wish you could train in meditation, and that just as much as we have GCSEs and A-levels in the UK, I wish that you kind of had Vipassana as something almost mandatory, because I believe that if every citizen had to do this and value that practice, we would be living in a very different culture today.
It's funny too, because you really see it like when I have friends who do all sorts of different things, but then I have friends who meditate Vipassana seriously. There's this like, I don't know, this beautiful safety that I feel being around these Vipassana meditators, because like they're so anchored in their equanimity, and also they are like profoundly committed to not causing any harm. So like, when you cross their path, obviously harm happens unintentionally at times too, but like they're not going to intentionally try to do anything to hurt you. And like,
one of the oaths that you have to take when you go to a Vipassana course is that you will not kill, and that you'll not intentionally harm anyone, which hopefully you wouldn't do in your day-to-day life. But I remember there was one girl, she was struggling. I think it was day 4. You could just see through the way that she was walking that she was having a difficult day. As we were waiting for lunch, there was this butterfly on the floor, beautiful butterfly, and all of us were kind of observing it. You can feel that everyone's watching it, even though you're not making eye contact with everyone. And this girl comes stomping along, and she stood on the butterfly. Oof. And it was like this audible gasp like from everyone. Out. But I remember how deeply I felt the pain of watching this death of a being. And I think part of what Vipassana does is, through having no stimulation, you come back to the core of you, which really wants all beings to be happy and to live a good life. And I remember for the whole rest of the afternoon sitting, I was thinking about the death of this creature. And so I completely agree that being around people who meditate, they carry this genuine sense of wanting good for the world and everyone. And it's really beautiful.
I think about the sorrow of that woman too, because like think about the tension that must have been replicating itself in her mind, or what she may have gone through that like even created that like potential for that to even happen there. And it's like, that's a lot of sorrow that person must have been carrying.
100%. And I hope she felt no blame for herself doing that, right? Because things happen in life, as you say, harm is unintentional often. I would love to speak more to one of the main teachings that I got out of Vipassana, which was relationship to attachment in life. Old school attachment. Exactly.
I'm always having to be like, no, not like popular modern psychology attachment. I'm like, not that one.
Not attachment
the old
styles.
one. The old one. Like,
and Goenka describes it through the lens of craving and aversion. And I'd love if maybe you could speak more to these teachings and how they've helped you.
When the Buddhist teachings started getting translated over to the West, it was interesting translating these old words into like, English or whatnot. And a lot of it got translated as like, desire is the cause of suffering. But Goenka was positioning it as craving is the cause of suffering. Craving and desire are not exactly the same thing. Like craving is like sort of wrapped with tension. It's good for you to have goals. Like it's good for you to like, you can be simultaneously ambitious and peaceful. You can like move forward and want to accomplish things, but are you doing that with stress? Like, are you like causing yourself tons of tension in the process? Or when you don't get what you want, are you okay with it? If you're craving for things to exist in a very particular way, And if you don't get what you want, you're like so miserable, and something's clearly wrong. You're incredibly attached. I think letting go of attachments is like huge, because that doesn't make you a passive person. That doesn't make you a cold person. It actually just helps you bring forward more presence and a lot more compassion.
And how do you think our relationship to attachment manifests in our relationships?
It shows up as control. Like, you may have these attachments in your mind, but the way that manifests in daily life is control. It's like, you want your partner to be this way. You want them to say these things. These are the ways that you exactly want them to be every day. And like that just falls into very dangerous territory. What I like to write about is, instead of trying to format a relationship around attachments, you want to format it around commitments, where commitments are open and vocal, and like there's no mystery, there's no secret about it. It's not like I'm holding silent expectations on you. You're putting your cards out on the table and you're saying, this is the way I like to be supported. And then you're seeing the way your partner likes to be supported, and you're like, oh yeah, I can do X, Y, and Z for you. Like these things they feel good and doable to me, as opposed to being like coerced into something. Or
I love that, because I think it is very natural that in our relationships we have certain expectations, as you say, desires, right? Like if I'm taking out the bins, I want my partner to also take out the bins. And that's fine, and that's not being attached to a perfect vision of your partner being someone who's always completely tidy and clean. It's just wanting them to put equal effort in. But I think, as you say, attachment becomes more sinister when it's you really wanting to change the fundamentals of who this person is, and not accepting them as they are.
I have so much gratitude to Thich Nhat Hanh for explaining it so simply. When he says love is understanding, like it's 100% correct. Like love is understanding. And what does that mean? Like if we're trying to come from a place of attachment, then it's going to manifest as control, and that's going to push out all of the freedom and the understanding out of a relationship. And you don't want to live like that. You want your partner to, like, part of their happiness is you supporting their freedom, and that's still within the confines of your commitments, but you're not like controlling their preferences. You're not controlling anything about them.
Can we speak more about this quote? Love is understanding.
Totally. It's the key to solving arguments.
It's not being understood. It's
understanding. Yeah. I think that was a big sort of turning moment. Like we opened up a new chapter in my relationship with my wife, where she also meditates seriously. Like, she's also done numerous 10-day courses. She's meditated 20, 30, 45-day courses like I have. When we started realizing that when we would fight, it would be so unproductive, because we were in these mini little battles, and it was like, who is going to win? Who's going to dominate the narrative? And who is the person who has to, like, apologize and give up the fight? Trying to win the battle, we were both losing. Like over and over and over again. We started realizing that, as opposed to trying to win, let me try to understand. I want to hear about how this series of events moved for you and what you were feeling. And it's so funny, because in that act of, practicing selfless listening, taking turns, and trying to really take in someone's perspective without projecting your tough emotions onto that perspective, and without thinking about like what you're going to retort and how you're going to like say something back, but just listening as selflessly as possible, you start developing the understanding. You're like, oh, I see where you're coming from. I see what's going on here. And that's just so helpful. And then the tension just fizzles out.
How much do you think it's the responsibility of your partner to also help you understand them? Perhaps they're angry about something, but they don't have the words to articulate that well. How can you recommend that people in relationships can work on this level of understanding from also helping their partner?
To make something like that, like, listening selflessly and trying to strive for understanding, to make that successful, I think both individuals have to work on cultivating their self-awareness, and a very specific self-awareness. Like, you want to be aware of where you are in your emotional spectrum, right? Because your emotions are going to vary throughout the day. So I think having multiple times a day where you're like, taking a moment to check in, you're like, oh, I feel good. And then you check in a little later, a few hours later, you're like, oh, I don't feel great right now. And like, just knowing where your emotion is at. Emotions love to make themselves bigger. If you're happy, you want to share that happiness with other people. If you're angry, you want to either have someone join you in your anger, or find a reason to fight them so that your anger can keep growing.
Yeah.
So the mind is very tricky.
This was actually one of my favorite parts from your book, this idea of preventative
Communication,
communication.
yeah.
And I think you discussed in it how you and your wife were in lockdown in your small apartment, and the arguments were starting to come up.
Yeah.
And you discussed how in the morning the first thing you would do upon waking up is just
First thing.
check in of how you feel. But also I loved that you'd say how you feel without needing to justify why. You wouldn't need to say, oh, I'm feeling angry because, oh, I'm feeling down or heavy because. You would just state the feeling how it is and not need to blame your partner either for having caused that feeling.
Or even necessarily finding a big reason as to why you're feeling that way. It's not like, oh, I woke up this morning and it's because of like the fight that my parents had when I was 8 years old. Like, no, like, it might be that, but usually it's because you didn't sleep that well, or you like, didn't eat something that was good for you, or sometimes there's a lot simpler reasons as to why you don't feel good, or like someone said something to you at work the day before and that's carrying over to the next day. So not necessarily overcomplicating the why, but just like what is actually happening in that moment and how we're going to deal with it, because whomever you're in proximity to, like whoever's literally closest to you, they're going to get the best of you and the worst of you. So that's like whether you have roommates, whether you have, living with your family, living with your partner, whatever it is. So when you're mindful and cognizant of that, it really is so helpful to just like be aware of each other's emotions. Like, where are you in your emotional spectrum? And if I know that you don't feel good, that's great information for me. That's great. So like, I'm going to try to treat you more gently. I'm going to try to do my best to like, what can I take off of your plate? Like, I'm feeling great. Like, I'm going to, move things around a lot more in this apartment than you need to. You go chill out, you go relax, and we also know like not to let like the sort of wildness of trying to uproot these old arguments from the past and use that as cannon fodder to like keep fighting.
And all the old resentments that have been building, And I love that you mentioned the people closest to us see the best of us and also the worst.
Totally.
Because in a way, that is the privilege of close relationships, is that people feel comfortable enough to be the full spectrum of themselves.
Yeah.
And I think having this neutrality towards the emotions that people are feeling helps you support that safe space. So, in the morning being like, oh, I'm feeling sad, that's as acceptable of an answer as being happy.
Exactly. Like, of course, like I feel sad I'll feel sad at different times, or I'll feel heavy or down or anxious. All these emotions are like flowing through us all the time. So if my wife doesn't feel good one day, great. Like, like
she might feel good tomorrow.
She might feel good 5 hours later. It's like these things are so transitory. So you can't expect the people around you to feel good all the time, especially because you know that you don't feel good all the time.
Yeah. I think sometimes there's a real hesitance to be honest about feeling the heavier spectrum of emotions. And it's difficult to do these check-ins of preventative communication when you feel like your partner's not actually being honest.
Oh, yeah.
Because you also rely on their self-awareness of their feelings to be able to then communicate.
That's one of my favorite things, when someone is so tense and they're like, I feel good, and they're like,
but do you?
Do you? And then you're trying to point it out in them and help them with their self-awareness as you're getting heated as well. So it's like,
I can tell you're not fine.
Yeah,
and they're like, but I'm good.
I love that.
100%. Yeah. Do you have any advice for anyone listening who struggles to even recognize what they're feeling, right? If they're asked in a moment, how do you feel, by their partner, perhaps they don't even know, they can't put a word to that. They can maybe feel a lot of things bubbling within them, but they can't put a label on it. What advice would
I think
you give
there's
them?
two raw things, and we're talking like premeditating, right? There's honesty and there's slowing down. Like, one is like, you have to think about how powerful honesty is for yourself, because dishonesty creates distance. You don't necessarily want to solve everything immediately, because that dishonesty will just create tension inside of you. So I think it really is quite helpful to slow down, and you don't need to solve this like giant argument immediately. Like if an argument can take like an hour, 2 hours, like it doesn't need to be this continuous stream. Like, take breaks, breathe, like check in with yourself about what's really true. And I find that to be like, when my wife and I have arguments, like we'll have moments where we're just like stewing in our anger, but also like quiet, because we're like reflecting. and then, taking turns
That's
listening,
so
taking turns
beautiful.
listening. Yeah.
And almost trying to halt this quick reaction that we want to have to what's being said,
Yeah.
right? And instead allowing the pause, allowing the silence, allowing
The
yourself
pause
to
is
sit.
your friend.
The pause is your friend. I
Yeah.
love that.
That's where
Yeah.
you really, the way that you allow the real you, like the way that you want to genuinely show up in the moment, it comes through the pause. Because if you're just reacting, it's just the past, you're repeating the past over and over again.
What advice would you give to people listening who don't know how to argue in a way that feels like they can embrace this pause, or in a way that feels productive? Because I think it's very common, especially for young people who don't have as much relationship experience, to enter into a relationship. They're in this gorgeous honeymoon, right?
Yeah.
Life feels wonderful. Life feels amazing. You're in this rose-tinted glasses of love feeling.
Yeah.
And then slowly things start to crop up in terms of
Yeah.
differences between you, and you don't know how to handle it because you want to stay in the feel of ease within the love.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of things there. I mean, one is you have to be okay with starting at zero. Like a lot of people, they're like, oh, but I don't know how to deal with this, so I'm not going to deal with it at all. It's like everyone starts at zero with everything. So just allow yourself to like try new things while you're arguing. If you know that you struggle with listening, like double down on listening, because that's just a habit that you build over time. Like the same way that you need to take your body to the gym, you have to take your mind to the gym. And cultivation for it to show up as the best version of itself. As soon as problems start popping up in a relationship, it doesn't mean that it's a bad relationship. That's just normal. Like ups and downs are just part of everything. And you can have like the two most self-aware people in the world, and they're still going to fight. And like they might fight a little more calmly, but they're going to have disagreements.
I'd love to hear more about your relationship with your wife. And to my knowledge, you've been together for 17 years, married for 10?
Yes, I think that's correct. It's funny because the time keeps changing every year, so it's hard to keep track of it. But yeah, we'll be married 10 years, I think 18 years together.
And now with all the reflections that you have, how do you think about the early days of your relationship?
Yeah, the early days, it was quite chaotic. The two of us felt this magnetic pull towards each other, where we just wanted to be together so bad. Like as soon as we were
How did you meet?
in contact, we met in college. We lived on the same floor, and she was a freshman and I was a sophomore. So she was 18 and I was 19. And as soon as we were in contact with each other, it was like just like a magnet pulling us together. I think we both felt this really strong ethereal push to like be together, but we did not know how to care for each other. That made the first 6 years of our relationship really difficult. It felt like we were living in a hurricane together.
For 6 years.
For 6 years, yeah. And we'd like be together and we'd break up, we'd get back together, and it was like, it got to a point where it was like we knew we couldn't be apart because we wanted to be together. So it was like, okay, let's just be miserable together. And it wasn't until we started meditating, things slowly started getting better. And that what was missing in our relationship was that like there was no self-awareness between, either of us. Like we couldn't see the way our emotions would change and how our emotions would affect our thought processes and how that would make us argue.
Can you give some examples of the chaos of what would happen and how your relationship looked on a day-to-day?
Yeah, I mean, it felt like we were living in a giant blame game. Either one of us would feel some emotion, and it's like, how can I make this your fault? Take no ownership of what I was feeling inside, whether you caused it or not, whether it was like the bills or like, because we were living together in a tiny apartment in New York City or in college, like there was just constant arguments. It was challenging at first. And then when we started meditating, we started realizing that like, oh, actually, I'm not actually mad at you. I actually just don't feel good. And that's not necessarily your fault, and we started actually noticing too that there are definitely times where I would have to apologize or she would have to apologize when we genuinely, did something egregious. But that's very few compared to like how often it was that one of us just was unaware of our emotions, and that would snowball into an argument where we would drag the other person down.
And why did you end up breaking up multiple times and then getting back together?
The difficulty of just not knowing how to be together and how to make it work. Like, why are we together if we're always fighting? Or like, why are we together if we're like, not having a good time with each other? And I think also like from, being young, and it's like, should I be, experiencing different relationships or being with other people? So it was just a period of confusion. After I meditated my first 10-day course. Sarah did hers like about 9 months later. After that, I did that. I was like, oh, this is the person I want to be with. The problem was just that I
Wow.
didn't know how to be with her and like
Mm.
how to own my part of it.
How did you know that she was the right person for you? Because I think a lot of people listening have that question about their relationships.
I felt it so strongly. I think not only the time period when I did that first course, like I was at a sort of crossroads in our relationship. Like, are we really going to be together? Like, are we going to get married
Mm.
someday? I think when we started doing the longer courses, like the 20, 30-day courses, like a few years later, like our relationship made a lot more sense. We took to Vipassana so strongly and we both like were so connected to it that we both had this feeling like, oh, like that's why we're together. Like we love each other, but we've been doing this thing. Like this is like our thing that we've been doing for lifetimes. I think that just like kind of clarified our bond.
That's so beautiful. I love that. Yeah. And I think Vipassana really invites you deep into yourself. And so
Yeah.
the fact that both of you are doing that all the time, I can't even imagine the kind of connection and depth that allows you to form, because it comes from such a truthful place.
The thing I'm so, so, so grateful for, like I'm so grateful that, you know, a practice that focuses on self-development, on personal development has totally brought a whole new life to my relationship. Interestingly, like when I did those first few courses, it felt simultaneously sad and also hopeful that I realized like all my relationships are really shallow. And I was like, wow, I'm not doing my part to deepen them because I was so disconnected from myself. And as I started being more honest with myself and started, you know, letting go of the heavy conditioning from the past, I started developing not only a deeper relationship with my wife, but like with my parents, with my siblings, with my friends, and it rippled outward in a very positive way.
Do you think it's possible to be in a relationship with someone who doesn't have the same kind of self-awareness practices? So say, for example, you had been with Sarah, but she hadn't taken to Vipassana like you had. Do you think your relationship could have continued to flourish because you didn't share that connection?
I think it could have. I know a lot of different couples that don't do the same practices. You know, one person will meditate or another person will have a, you know, serious therapy practice. I think it's interesting because a lot of these practices that do help you transform, they're going to help you build some degree of self-awareness. Like self-awareness is so intrinsic. It's the groundwork that you build a happy life on. And without it, you know, you're just going to be living quite unconsciously.
I love that. So knowing that, you know, you don't need to be a meditator in order to develop this self-awareness,
Yeah.
but kind of having something.
Yeah.
Some kind of practice that deepens your connection to self, that helps you realize who you are, what you want in life, and trying to find someone who has a similar commitment to their own understanding of themselves.
Someone needs to also have a commitment to growth. There are really so many tools out there, and you know that something's for you if it's challenging but not overwhelming. Like, because you do want it to be challenging. You want it to be challenging so that you're building new strength and you're developing yourself in new areas, but not so overwhelming where like, oh, like too much trauma comes up and you're incapacitated by it, and you know, you don't want to hurt yourself through any process either. So you have to find something that meets you where you're at.
I would love to talk more about our culture. And when I say our culture, obviously that means many things to many people, but I think in general, Western perceptions of our emotions, of our relationships, what determines a good relationship or not. How do you think our culture sets us up, positively or negatively, to have meaningful romantic relationships?
It sets us up quite negatively, like not really for success. I think sometimes we don't want to admit to ourselves that our minds are actually a sponge. And a lot of what we take in are like Disney movies and romantic comedies. And what you normally see in those situations is a very simple story arc where it's like two people meet, there's one challenge, and they live happily ever after. And it's just not like that. You know, even the healthiest relationship will have multiple challenges. There will continue to be ups and downs. And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with, where they get into a new relationship, craving the excitement, craving the joy. But then once things start getting hard and challenging and the mirror really comes up and you really see yourself clearly, then people run away.
Can you explain more to me about this idea of a relationship being a mirror? What does that mean?
When you're really in close proximity to someone, you get to very clearly see what you're good at and what you're not good at. And it's hard to run away from that. It's hard to like ignore that, where you can see very clearly, like, I lack patience. I don't listen well. I, struggle with X, Y, and Z, whatever it could be, because everyone's conditioning is shaped so differently. Coming to terms with that and accepting that part of being in love is literally embracing your own growth. Like who we are when we first met versus who we're going to be over the years, it's going to evolve, it's going to change. And you don't want to fight that. You actually want to embrace it and then like, literally take your evolution into your own hands. Like, if I know that I struggle at this, let me intentionally try to develop it because it's going to help me in my everyday life, but it's also really going to bring harmony into my relationship.
I love that. How being in love with someone is almost also being in love with who they're helping you become, and like
Yeah.
witnessing your own becoming through being in a relationship with them and having it mirrored to you. That's beautiful. If you could redesign a perfect culture around helping support us in our relational endeavors, how would you design culture?
Wow, I've never gotten that question before. I would first focus it on the individual, where like we're trying to help people have toolkits to be able to then develop their emotional skill set. Like some people really enjoy their personal development in isolation, where it's like, you're out there meditating. Other people really enjoy their self development in group, like different forms of group therapy or AA, can be like being in the collective can really help uplift the better parts of you. But I think finding from a young age, like where you really thrive in your personal development setting and then helping, give you these tools so you can develop, I think, these three key skills like self awareness, non-reaction, which means like pausing, not immediately being impulsive, having a degree of equanimity. The third aspect of compassion towards yourself and other people. Like these are fundamental human skill sets. And if you're able to learn those as an individual, you're going to be much better equipped to relate. So I would really focus it like very young with the individual.
Wow. And can you imagine that coming from parents teaching
Yeah.
kids, or built into the education system, built into movies?
Yeah.
Like, how do you think that understanding of the toolkits would flow in culture?
I'm always hoping that like, and I still have hope for that, like even within, 5 to 10 years from now, that the same way that it's become so popular to take care of your health, that it becomes so popular to take care of your mind. So it's not just like mental health awareness, right?
Yeah.
That's just like raising the flag, but it's like active care. Like, what are you doing to care for your mind? And when you're in conversation with somebody or you're meeting someone new, you're like, hey, what, not only like, what are your hobbies, but like, how do you take care of your mind? Like, what do you do?
Love
And it just becomes like a part of common culture.
Yeah. Do you know of any cultures around the world where you think we're already close to that?
Sort of in the times of the Buddha, when he was alive, like there were so many millions of people that were meditating and actively developing their mind. There's been so many indigenous cultures that have, had traditions or different methods that can help you develop as an individual. Western society has been, developing therapy. So you see it all, like everyone has this sort of push to like help the better version of ourselves come out, and people have different means, which to me is great because we need a lot of different tools because people's minds are shaped very differently.
Something I found fascinating from one of my good friends at university from India, he said that it was mandatory every morning to do a meditation at the start of the day in school. And then it was also mandatory to do yoga. That's my dream.
Yeah.
As someone who
Yeah.
loves meditation and
Yeah.
yoga and wishes that it was more embraced
Yeah.
within mainstream culture, I was like, wow, that's amazing that
Yeah.
you have to do it in school. But he said that it was actually turned into a bit of a joke and everyone made fun of it, and that it wasn't embraced, and that actually now, at least in his circles in India, yoga is very uncool, which is ironic because I think in the West we all think, we like prize India as like the roots of yoga and then imagine that, everyone is more advanced in these spheres. It's funny how even when you do embed it in systems, it doesn't always mean adoption. And I think it's so difficult to get people intrinsically motivated behind practices of self-care.
So I want to tell you this quick story. So my wife and I were really fortunate, and we were able to go on this pilgrimage to India, and we got to visit a lot of the major sites of the Buddha's life. And one of the places we went to was this little town called Vaishali. There was a nun that we met there, and there was just like all these Buddhist nuns there, but they also ran their own school for the town. The town's like really, really impoverished. They have all these kids that they teach there, and we got to visit the school too. And what was incredible was like the kids themselves ask for more meditating time. So they all know Anapana. And
Wow.
Anapana being the awareness of the natural breath. They like are like extending their time of like, 10 minutes to 15, 20 minutes. And it's really cool seeing the way that, when you do have these practices to balance out the mind, that the like how concentrated you are, how aware you are, like there's just so many positive benefits to it. But to me, I'm always thinking about these like Mahayana nuns who like practice Goenka's, which is a tradition that comes from Theravada, and like they're just taking the best of what they have, and
Yeah,
it's
it's
very
incredible.
cool.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
that's something that I really appreciate about Vipassana is that one of the things that's made clear to you on day one is that this is a practice that goes beyond religion.
Oh, yeah.
You can believe whatever you want to believe,
Yeah.
and still objectively, awareness of the breath is something that will serve you.
Yeah, it's so like based in reality, which I'm really grateful for that too. And it's cool. Like I've gone to courses. Like one time I had the privilege of translating for a Catholic nun who was there, and she
As you
like
do.
yeah, and she was like she loved it. She thought it was like so
Cool.
awesome. And people who are like Muslim, Jewish, like it
Yeah.
doesn't even matter where you're coming from, but all people from all walks of life go.
Are you up for a game?
Sure.
Da, 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 da. The game is called Help Me Love Better. I'm going to describe 3 life scenarios
All right.
that someone listening might be going through, and I'd love you to just help get in their shoes and give them some advice
Sure.
based on your relationship wisdom. Okay, so the first situation is actually inspired by a conversation that I had with a good friend last week. Her belief is that love is this almost ethereal feeling. She believes that love is not a series of actions or a skill that we need to learn or practice, but that it's an almost spiritual connection that transcends time or context or space.
Cool.
And so to her, love isn't something hard. She believes that it's easy and free-flowing and that love just is. However, she was expressing that some of her friends feel disconnected to her or feel that she doesn't love them. And she is quite confused because to her, she's trying to explain that, she'll be in her room and thinking of these people and only is filled with the deepest love. And she's confused how they can't feel that and how
Yeah.
even if she's not there with them at the time, that they would doubt that love. Yeah, what advice would you give her?
That's a lovely, I'm glad that, that's coming up, because it really highlights the point that love and care are not the same thing. They're 2 different things. And care is very much oriented in learning and trying to understand the ways that I can support your happiness. Like not make you happy, but support the happiness that comes from within you to help support the conditions around that happiness. And I think whether you're with friends or with, a partner, you can have that ethereal feeling of love, which like I totally agree. Like that love is so transcendental, like it's so big and so like invisible, and you can just feel it so strongly. Care is also needed to figure out like how do we figure out the best way to be friends, or how do we figure out the best way to like for us to be roommates, to like be in contact with each other. So I think that's something that's worth having conversations about with your friends, like how can I be there for you?
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think it's so rooted in what you talk about a lot in the book, which is that how we love people might not be how they feel loved. And coming back to that quote of, aiming to understand someone and what they need, and also being willing to just ask that question and to not see that as a weakness.
And care can take months and months and years, and it'll evolve and change over time because every individual's preferences aren't going to stay the same. So like how you wanted your happiness to be supported 10 years ago, it's not going to be the same as it is now. So I think understanding that like this is like a micro mini culture that we're designing together, and that takes a lot of communication.
Okay, the second situation. So someone else I know is a workaholic, and he's used to pulling late nights and long hours to get things done, and he is revered at work for his commitment. However, to maintain this dedication, he rarely notices his feelings. He passively engages with his emotions because he finds that they can be distracting to the work. His partner can sometimes struggle to feel connected to him because when she's going through tough times, he can often recommend that she just tries to see the positive side.
Yeah.
What advice would you give to him in deepening that closeness with his partner?
The closeness that he feels with his partner and that she's able to feel with him is deeply related to how close he is to himself. If you're disconnected with yourself, other people are going to feel that because your relationships with them are only going to have so much depth. So it's really important to not get lost, not necessarily lost, but not to hide in your work, because that's totally where it's like, this is the most immediate problem at hand, and I'm totally focusing on solving this. And then another problem, and you're just constantly in that solution active mode, and you have no time to reflect. You have no time to have gratitude. You have no time to check in with your feelings. And that's how you're able to connect with yourself. And other people can feel that. So it's so critical to not hide. I think in the same way that some people are workaholics, like that it's not only just because of the economic situation, like, right, we all need money to survive, but that becomes a way to like run away from your emotions too.
I think we have to recognize, especially I think as a young person, you feel this pressure to hustle in order to make a name for yourself in the world. It feels like your emotions aren't always the priority, the most pressing matter at hand. But I think in the case of this person, it's taking a step back and asking, what are the priorities in life here? And would you recommend that he changes tangible things in his life to do with his work? Do you think he should take on less work in order to make the space for feeling the feelings? Or can they coexist?
I think they can coexist. So you don't necessarily need to do less work. I think you just need to add in moments where you're checking in with yourself. And especially like in terms of priorities, like if your partner is a major priority in your life, then automatically that means that you need to spend time being intentional about your growth. And if they feel a lack of some disconnection there and you care about them, then you need to work on that so that, you don't lose them.
Your answer reminds me of a quote from your book that I would love to read. Hard truth. Your relationship with silence will reflect how at home you feel within your own mind and body. If you need to constantly get away from yourself, there is unprocessed pain within you that needs attention and care. Oh, that I remember that hit me. I screenshotted that and sent that indirectly to some of the people in my life. Some of the people who like can't have baths because they find the silence of just sitting with themselves too difficult. But I think that really relates. Why are we drawn to the distraction of work? What are we avoiding? And then how is that forming the disconnection with the people in our lives?
Yeah, I think it's just such a powerful moment when you can just be with yourself. And if you find that you're alone, or you close your eyes and you're just like there with yourself and you immediately have some sensation that you're trying to get away from, then like there's something that needs to be processed.
Yeah. And the third situation, the third person lives with her boyfriend. They go about their days like everything's normal, but she has been keeping a secret from him. She pretends that there's nothing wrong, but there's a secret that is gnawing at her. And she's scared to tell him because of how it will affect the relationship and how he sees her. She loves her boyfriend so much and she doesn't want him to fall out of love with her. What advice would you give her to love better?
That's a really tough one, and it happens a lot where like some of us are just like holding on to secrets that are just like gnawing at us. Honesty is the way to go. Like if you're really trying to be with someone and build with them and design a home that feels calming to your nervous system, like even this individual, right? In that scenario, they're having trouble being calm within themselves because they're holding on to this heavy thing and they love this person. So let's say they made some mistake or something needs to come up so that they can talk about it and get over it. You're not only giving yourself an opportunity to close that distance that dishonesty has created, but you're allowing yourself to have peace within yourself. So it's like almost like this person needs to forgive themselves too, to a certain extent, to be able to like tell the truth. Let's talk about it. Let's deal with it. Let's see if we can get over that. Because either way, like, do you really want to live like that? Constantly suppressing? Like, that sucks. That's a hard way to live.
100%. Yeah. Honesty is one of the most essential parts of any relationship. And as someone who has been in relationships and who has faced moments like this person, I know firsthand how difficult it is to actually face the truth of something that you are feeling and let someone else into that. Like, there is so much fear involved. There's often shame, there's embarrassment, there's fear for the future. How would you recommend that someone listening who is not as well practiced in being honest and being vulnerable, how can they go about finding the strength to do that?
I think they need to realize that there are these positive benefits to being honest that come after the hard moment. Where, like, let's say, like, the honesty, even if it breaks the relationship, at least you're like opening a new chapter in your life where you don't have to constantly live with tension. Living with stress, living with tension, ultimately it's just going to make you sick. Like, you're just not going to feel good.
Yeah.
And I think understanding that benefit, and if the person is able to handle it, and you can find a way to, like, sort of recreate or, you know, change things around in the relationship so that there can be more harmony, then you have this new opportunity for connection to be even more deeply connected. So I think you need to think about the benefits, and they'll, like, inspire you to, like, you know, put the honesty out there.
Can you think of any examples in your own relationship where you've had to lean into honesty or vulnerability and it's actually ended up making things better?
Someone was offering us, like, someone wanted my wife to come on some show or something with me. And we were, like, thinking about it, and I was like, I'm down if you're down, but, like, and she was just like, I don't think I want that, you know? And I'm like, I love that. Great.
Yeah.
Like, thank you for being honest with me. And those are, like, little moments, but they happen all the time where it's just like, it takes a little while for us to even see what we want to do, letting ourselves process it and just, like, letting that honesty come forward. And it's like, okay, I'm glad we took the time we needed to really figure out what we wanted to do.
Yeah. Yeah, because I can imagine if she had gone on that show because she
Yeah.
thought that you wanted her to.
No, like, I don't
Maybe
want to
this
force her
niggling
into
resentment.
anything.
Yeah.
No, and like, I'm a more extroverted person, and, like, I'm lucky that she allows me near her because she's such a solitary individual, you know, like.
Stop!
Yeah.
So good.
Yeah, so it's like, great, like, you live your life the way you want to live it, and I'll be out here, like, talking and stuff.
What do you love most about Sarah?
Oh my gosh, I think what I love most is that she's like a weapon at meditating. She's just, like, so good at, like, I mean, she's beautiful, but then the fact that her mind has the capacity to accumulate wisdom. Like, I'm on the journey like everybody else. She's also on the journey. Like, we're not, like, perfectly wise or anything. Like, we don't think of ourselves as gurus or as teachers, nothing like that. We're just, like, on the path like everybody else. But she has this great capacity to keep going, you know? So I think of her as, like, my comrade in wisdom, because, like, you know, it's literally like a war against ignorance, and, like, ignorance is constantly trying to accumulate itself by, you know, enjoying being unconscious. And we're, like, doubling down on self-awareness, doubling down on being equanimous, like, keep developing that truth, you know, that understanding of impermanence. And so it feels like we're comrades, like, in this battle together.
That is so cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was lucky enough to meet Sarah on a call when we were just getting to know each other. And even though the call was like 10 minutes, I felt this sense of calm from her. Just her aura is so beautiful. Like, I can see that she meditates.
I love it. I love having conversations with her. I love exploring wisdom together. And it's like, yeah, I just trust her judgment so much.
And for anyone who is listening and who is looking for love or trying to discern whether or not their partner is the right person for them, can you leave us with some final green flags and red flags to look out for?
Sure. One of the biggest red flags is probably someone who acts like they know everything and is just, like, really confident in their views. But when you think about it, every view is imperfect. Like, you don't know everything about politics. You don't know everything that's happened in history. Being able to reveal a sense of humility and, like, oh, I think this, but, like, you know that if they got more information, you know that their view would change a little bit. So if they feel really static in their viewpoint and that their viewpoint is always right, there's something not
Red
quite
flag.
right there. And in terms of, like, a green flag, I think something that's really always just, like, exciting to me about any individual that I come across is, like, if they are able to communicate calmly, especially about difficult topics, or, like, when you see people having a conversation and they may be on two different sides of the political aisle and they're just, like, not trying to destroy each other with their opinions, but they're instead asking questions like, oh, why do you think that? Or like, tell me more. It's like, wow, that's like a big green flag, because that doesn't mean that you're like weak in your view or weak in your opinion. It's just that you can hold your view without necessarily, you don't need it to be like the dominant, like I don't have to make you agree with me, because that feeling really comes from your ego, where it's like the ego wants everyone to have the same like thoughts and views, and everyone to just agree with you, but like that's not reality.
And it comes back to that idea of love being understanding, right?
Yeah.
And making the effort to understand someone's perspective
Yeah.
is only going to translate to a wonderful relationship where they're asking about your needs and expectations
Totally.
and how you really
My
feel.
favorite question and my favorite thing to say is like these days is like, tell me more. Like what, like, I want to know how you got to that idea.
There you go. Do you have a final word of advice for everyone listening?
I think the same way that people have practices for gratitude, whether they meditate or not, it's helpful to reflect a little bit on the impermanent nature of everything. Everything is impermanent. That means that this universe that we live in, at the atomic level, at the biological level, at the cosmological level, like it's almost like we're living in this giant river that is always flowing forward. So remembering that everything's impermanent, it helps you bring a lot more presence into your interactions. So become a friend of impermanence.
Spoken like a true Vipassana meditator. Thank you so much. I feel like there is just so much that we align on in our visions of the world, and it's just been a joy getting to meet you in person, getting to hear your thoughts on meditation,
likewise.
your journey. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you so much too, Jay. This has been like incredible. I'm so happy that we had this time to connect.
We have two final traditions at the end of every episode. The first, inspired by the name of the podcast, is I will always ask my guest for their casual magic of the week. So a tiny moment, a moment of mundane magic, a moment where perhaps you were looking around in your everyday life and thought, wow, it was so lovely when that stranger just smiled at me, or wow, the way that the light's coming into the room right now is just really casually magic.
Oh my gosh, I totally had that moment a few nights ago. My wife and I were walking in London. We don't even really know where we're going. We're like walk outside, we pick a street, and we're like going down, and then there's like all these shops, and there's lights that are in the trees, and it just looks so beautiful. And I'm like, and then we even stopped to take a picture, and the picture is nowhere near as beautiful as the actual moment. And we were just like in awe that we were even here and how nicely designed the city was. And it was just like, wow, like it just felt so special to be, I don't know, going on this like aimless walk together. Felt great.
Wow. And if you can have that feeling like 18 years into a relationship with someone, like just merely being in their company, enriching the moment, that's so beautiful. Thanks for sharing.
I'm really grateful.
I think for me, I had a moment the other day. It was my brother's pre-birthday celebration. He's turning 22 tomorrow, actually. He's quite introverted. We don't normally celebrate his birthday, and he's just not a big birthday person.
Yeah.
So it was lucky that we even got to mention that it was his birthday. Yeah. But my family, we invited our closest family friends, who are like our neighbours, like my second parents, and they came round to our family home. We just had a meal together, and I remember this moment. We had a cake, he was blowing out the candles, and I was looking around at all the people in the room, and I thought, I'm so lucky to have been raised alongside these people. Just like seeing the joy and love in everyone's eyes. Yeah, that was my casual magic.
Oh, that's so special. I love that.
And also getting to sing 22 by Taylor Swift. You only get to use that 1 year of everyone's life, so that's his
cool.
year of 22, yeah. And now we're going to listen to a casual magic moment from one of you guys. And if you're interested in your voice note being featured, you can send in a little message to @casualmagicpodcast on Instagram.
Hello, Jade. My name is Sarah. I am from the United States, but I actually studied abroad in Denmark, in Copenhagen, and it was so wonderful. I'm so excited to listen to your podcast, but some casual magic that I have been feeling is looking at the small things and allowing them to remind me of a time that I was held. For example, I have a sun catcher in my room, and it reminds me of when I was in Denmark and the way that the sun flowed through my room, and it makes me feel so happy, and life is just so much more special when you look at those small casual moments. I have a wall dedicated in my room at college full of stuff from my trip, and I always remember to call and text my friends as much as I can, so I'm able to keep up with that and hold on to those small things that bring me joy, like the reflection from the sun catcher on my wall, the way that a piece of bread tastes and how it reminds me of the same taste of my time abroad. But definitely soaking up moments and allowing that version of myself to hold me in this current moment to allow for growth while also planning new cool things and looking forward to the future as well as soaking in the present. And so honored to be sending this to you. I hope you have a wonderful day filled with lots of casual magic.
And the final ritual that we have at the end of every episode is I love to take a moment to reflect on the past week, and I invite my viewers to get out a journal, get out a notebook, get out your notes app, or to just answer these questions in your head. Feel free to pause the podcast and really take a moment to reflect on your week so that you can set an intention for the coming week. And Diego, I'm going to ask what your intention for the week is after I ask these questions.
Sure.
Ask yourself, what went well this week? What are you proud of? What are some little wins? And what is something that maybe challenged you this week? Or something that you would change coming into the next week? And then, based on this, what is an intention that you would set for your coming week? This can be a word, a phrase, or a theme. Diego, what is your intention for next week?
I think my big intention for next week is presence, especially when I'm around my mom and dad. I, of course, have a bunch of work to do next week, but I'm going to get to spend some time with them too. And I feel like every moment with them is ever more precious than it was in the past because time keeps moving forward. We're going to get to celebrate my dad's birthday next week, so I'm pretty pumped. And I really just want to give that guy a big hug.
Oh,
yeah.
I love that. I really feel that too. Like my whole relationship with my parents has shifted a lot in the last few years as I've seen them as holistic humans rather than just my caregivers.
Yeah.
I think my intention for next week is creation. So I've been lucky enough to take quite a bit of time off over this Christmas, and it's the least that I've been on social media in my entire 8 years of creating. I've hardly been on my phone, and I feel so much inspiration.
Cool.
And I've been missing this feeling of, being like racing to get to my desk and just make things. So I'm really excited to create some good content. Yeah. And as always, if no one has told you guys today, I hope you remember that you are enough. You are enough exactly as you are at this point in your journey, no matter how your relationships feel in your life, whether you feel like you're with the right person or not, whether you feel that you're desiring the right partner in your life, exactly where you are today is where you need to be. And I just hope that you give yourself the grace of where you are, and good things will keep coming your way. Thank you so much for being here. It means the world. As always, please give it a little like, give it a little review, give a little comment if you enjoyed it. It really does mean the world, and I will read every single comment. And of course, follow Diego at, what's your on Instagram?
At Yung Pueblo, YUNG _ PUEBLO.
Amazing, at Yung Pueblo. And you can check out his book from
How to Love Better. You can get it on Amazon and bookstores, wherever you can find books.
Amazing. And it's coming out March
11th.
March 11th. Amazing. So near my birthday. It's a birthday gift for me. Thank you so much, Diego.
Yeah.
Bye, everyone.
Stay tuned and stay magical.
And a quick little message from me to say, welcome to the end of season 1. Guys, if you are at this point, I just cannot sufficiently express my gratitude enough for supporting this project of mine. Like, it has been a dream to get to sit down and explore so many ideas about my life, about themes of what it means to be human that I think about all the time, and I've just never really had the time or space to sit and explore them to depth. So yeah, it's just been such an incredible project, and I've been able to meet so many amazing other creators through it and to get to learn from them and their wisdom, and I've loved connecting with all of you via the Instagram page and hearing your casual magic moments and seeing your casual magic photos. Like, this podcast has just been everything that I hoped it would be and more, and yeah, I'm so excited for season 2. Okay, so the plan is to take about 2 months break, and this is your opportunity to go back and listen to any episodes that you wanted to listen to that you didn't have time to. I have left a survey in the description of this video or in the show notes, and I would love if you could go fill that out and just give me feedback. What did you like? What did you not like? And that survey will be closing in 2 days, so definitely go fill that out if you want your opinion to be heard. I'd love your thoughts on everything from the structure of episodes, from like the meditation to the journal prompts, to the guests and the themes chosen and how to improve it. And I'd love to think more about how to create community from this podcast and just help you meet more like-minded people. I'd also love to do a live event, probably in London, so stay tuned for that. And I'm just so grateful for all the love that you poured into this community. So for now, stay tuned and stay magical. Bye!